Welcome to the Bikini Things podcast, where we talk everything from fitness and competing to mental health and living a healthy lifestyle. I'm your host, LauraIFBBPro, Laura Morche, here with LauraIFBBPro, Sammy Joe, and we are so excited to have you here with us. Let's get started.
On today's episode, we are going to be talking about peak week, what to expect, what is peak week. We can even go over myths about peak week. We're going to do a Wasatch Warrior recap as well. That was the most recent pro show, and then kind of a little update of where we're at now and what's going on. So let's start with an update. So I guess for me, the biggest update is I am in prep now. I have 11 weeks officially until Patriots Pro in Vegas on July 20th.
Okay.
And then we have a lineup in August. I think I'm going to do Texas Pro again.
Okay.
Nashville Fit, and Arizona Pro.
Fun.
Arizona Pro is like on the fence.
Yeah.
I don't know if I need to do that one. It really just depends on what judges I see at those first three shows and kind of what my feedback is. Essentially, obviously the goal is Olympia, but if my feedback is that I need time to grow, then I'm just gonna call it.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, pro shows, right, we go based on our feedback. So at that point, if you're 3 shows in and you're like not feeling it, the 4th show is probably like,
there's no point.
Yeah, maybe take a little break, or pick a different one, or call it. So very cool. So I'm super excited. I am just chilling in my off season, so no plans right now, and I'm honestly fine with it. Like it could be this whole year ends up being a year off, which is fine if that's the case. Like it's probably just needed. I'm so freaking tall compared to everyone else. It's just like I feel like I sound like such a broken record, but the reality is when you're tall, I mean, first of all, like you're not seeing guys that are 6'4", 6'5" doing open bodybuilding. Like that doesn't happen. So you just have to take the time. Like you literally I just need more muscle mass everywhere. Off season's going good, life's going good, coaching's going good. I'm having fun doing these episodes. So I feel good with the progress. I'm gonna do a gut map.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah.
Good luck with that one.
I know.
Just the process of doing it.
Yeah.
The results and all of that kind of stuff, that is cakewalk, but
you have to get a sample of your own poo.
I never want to have to do that again.
Yeah, so I'm going to do one, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to talk with the clinic on Monday, I think. But my appetite is a lot lower than normal in off season, and normally I can just eat like no problem, high calories for months and months at a time. So it's been unusual. And then the food sensitivity test I did back in November showed that some of my gut bacteria were a little low, which is unusual because I'm also religious with my probiotics. So I think it's a good idea just to do it, just to know. And that way, if there is something off, the rest of my off season will likely be even better. So we're going to do that. But yeah, I'm mostly chilling. How was Wasatch last weekend? Like, what was that like being able to talk to?
It was good. It was nice. It was definitely a busier show than I thought it was going to be. Just in general, it was a bigger show. Even not even just for the pro side of things, but it was really well ran. It was super cute, and I feel like just Salt Lake in general is actually a bigger bodybuilding community than I thought. A lot of people that were there were from Utah, so I was like, oh wow, I had never been to Utah before, so I was like, I'm surprised that the bodybuilding community here is as big as it is. So I just feel like California and Vegas are the hubs for bodybuilding. Yeah. So it's you don't really hear much about
or it's just states. It's not as big of a city either. Yeah. Like Salt Lake. Texas, I know, right, that's a big hub, or anywhere there's a big city, you're gonna have a community. But Salt Lake City, it's a smaller city. Utah's very Mormon, so it's bodybuilding's kind of unusual. Yeah, so I was super shocked. And I mean, the pro lineup there was 35 girls. So it was a lot bigger than I had even expected it to be, but it was really cool to see. I watched the whole pro show because my booth was right outside the door, and I was like, all right, cool, let's see everybody. I've got 12 weeks, we just started, let's use this as motivation to really flip the switch and dive into it. But everybody, again, it was one of those shows where everybody looked great, and it was the finite details of splitting hairs to decide who is who. Some pro debuts, so that was cool to see, and just a lot of people that I recognized and have competed with before, so it was nice to see
see other women in the industry. So it was a good show overall, though.
Yeah, I watched the live stream. It looked good. Obviously, huge pro show. Like 35 athletes in a bikini pro show. That's a big show. Yeah. That's a big show for sure. I've done some that are like that. Like Nashville is usually about that size. I did it the last 2 years. I feel like that one's usually about 35. But yeah, this one, it's really, I feel like Wasatch almost kind of, it doesn't kick off the season, but it almost does now. Yeah. Because there used to be Legends back a few years ago. There was a February Bikini Pro show, so that would be like the first one of the year. And then that one went away. And so now I feel like Clash is kind of, in March is kind of the first one. And then, you know, if you're not on top of it during the holidays, you're probably not ready for March. Yeah. So then a lot of people, and depending on the timing of the Olympia, right? So a lot of people are kind of jumping in April, May. So this one always feels like the official first one. Season, yeah. And then they had like an expo and everything too there, didn't they?
No, so there was like maybe 15 different vendors there. Okay. In the so it was a convention center, but it was like the lobby of the convention center. Okay. So there was a decent amount of vendors and booths and things like that, but like I guess you would say like a very mini expo, but it was just like a big circle and then a bunch of people. Cool. So a decent amount of vendors for just being a show. So that was really cool to see, like how many people traveled there, and like they had local people, like local industry people there too. So that was really cool, but definitely on the smaller side in terms of like expo things like that. But yeah, it was cool. So for that one, like just a little recap, Amy reclaimed her title. And then I want to say top 5 was...
You had Brittany Hamilton getting second. So the top 2 especially, I wasn't surprised. Like I figured it'd come down to Brittany and Amy. And then third was, I don't know how to say her name, her first name, but I think she goes by Emmy. Yeah. So she won her pro card at USA's I think 2 years ago. So I competed with her at Sasquatch 2 years ago. She got third. Allison Testu was 4th, and then in 5th I think was, I feel like Malou was 6th if I'm remembering correctly, so I'm forgetting who was in 5th, because we can pull it up. They did the top 4 comparison, so I know it was Emmy, Amy, Brittany, and Allison Testu, but yeah, so many really good athletes at that show. Like it's always a lot of and the live stream too. Like my goodness, like the GoCo live streams are so good.
I heard so many great things.
So good, yeah, really really good. That he did the Detroit Pro 2 the week before that, and like the quality is awesome. Yeah. So even when you're a spectator at home, it's really cool to see that like level of detail and. I just feel like if you're a fan of bodybuilding, right, you guys, we should all buy the live streams. We should all, if we can't go to the shows, 100%. Still support the promoters, buy the live stream.
Yes. Maya was 5th and Malou was 6th. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So we figured it out.
Yeah. And okay, so a lot of girls had new suits this year, and I think they're so pretty. Maya has I think it's a hollow indigo. Yeah. Super pretty. And then Malou has the green.
Love that.
It's so her color.
Love that.
So her color. I think it's so pretty. And then Amy had her classic red on, and then Brittany Hamilton had like a blue.
Like a turquoise.
Like a turquoisey blue. Yeah. Super pretty. So the colors were so cute on stage. So I loved seeing that contrast because they all had just like something different.
Yeah. And even Emmy, I think because I think she took 2023 off. I'm pretty sure at Sasquatch she wore royal blue, and I think when she turned pro she wore turquoise. So even for her, red is a new color. So I love it. I love it when pros mix up suit colors. I know we all have colors we like ourselves in, but I think there's just something really exciting and fresh about switching it up. Still obviously choosing a color that looks good on you, but I think it's just very exciting, and it adds like that newness factor or something when you do switch up your suit color.
Yeah, and too, it kind of, I feel like gives amateur competitors like a new perspective of like colors to wear and things like that. So like it's cool to see how it's not just like a trend in the industry, but it's like the pros are able to venture out, find a new color that works for them, but then also influence like amateur competitors to try new colors and things like that. So
yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think another thing too is like somebody who's competed for a little while longer, I feel like we're in a very experimental time for suit colors. Like there are so many choices you have now that would have been weird a few years ago. Like magenta, like some of these lighter teal colors, like some of the velvet fabrics, like all of that. Those things weren't really around. Like girls didn't really wear molded cups unless you were in Europe, and even then the suits are still way different. So I like where we're at. I like that it's experimental. It gives me a lot of ideas for whenever I'm on stage next.
Yeah, I'm like, every time I hang the suits up, I'm like, maybe it's that one. And then I hang the pink one and I'm like, oh, I love the pink one. And then I pick up another blue one and I'm like, do I keep doing blue? And then I see the green ones and I'm like, oh.
Well, yours is kind of like a greenish blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The tricot jade.
Yeah, I feel like you should just get a bunch of suits.
Yeah.
Now that you're like, officially toxic suit stylist, it's also a way to market yourself, right? Like you design it. So I feel like it'd be fun for you to just like mix it up, do like a different suit every show this year, because you can try a lot of other colors.
One color combo that Margaret put together a couple weeks ago, and it's like the epitome of mermaid. And I can't wait. I was like, that's my suit.
What's the fabric?
So she has it on, I want to say she had it on Toxic Teal, but there's literally like our Twinkle Mermaid or Toxic Mermaid. And I was like, I think I want those stones on the mermaid fabric, and I think it would be perfect. Yeah,
Toxic Teal is really pretty. I love that color. I wore that color in 2021. Super pretty. It's like a blue with like a little bit of green in it, and then depending on what stones you put on it, it can kind of go one way or the other. So I love that color. That'd be fun.
I'm super excited.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Me too. Well, cool.
So with that, we can transition into peak week because again, season is ramping up for everybody. So for our first time competitors or even seasoned competitors, tips, tricks, myths, things like that about peak week. I feel like the word peak week is like the most dreaded word for a lot of people. And it, even like me, like the first time I competed and it was like, peak week is next week. And then Saturday hit and I was like, okay. Like I expected something to just drastically change overnight when peak week came. So it's so funny to hear like the different stories or like horror stories that people like create in their minds before they go into peak week. And then come to realize that it's like not that big of a thing, or for some people it is, but just the different things that people go through. So essentially, what is peak week?
Sure. So peak week is the week before a show where you're trying to peak your body. And while there are a lot of established ways you can, like overall methods you can do that, like push-pull, for example, is one. Depleting someone into a show is one. There's no one size fits all. And even as an athlete, your body will likely respond and peak differently show to show, one prep to the next. So there's never one size fits all, but I think the biggest thing that confuses people, and especially new competitors, is because a lot of times, depending on your experience, if you're brand new, especially in the bikini division, we see people just doing these like Hail Mary crash diets during their peak week, like ultimately when someone's not, say, ready for a show. So I think that's where it gets a little bit of the scary reputation from. And there's a little bit of confusion too, because you'll hear that, like, right, you'll hear these girls who are doing hours and hours of cardio every single day, eating essentially nothing, told not to drink water for days on end, which is very dangerous. And then you'll also have these open bodybuilders or male competitors or pros or wellness competitors or whoever talking about how they're eating hundreds and hundreds of grams of carbs every day. And so I remember having this feeling of being just very confused when I was brand new. So we have a lot to work with. we purposely didn't have a structured bullet points. Well, there's so much we can talk about here. So maybe should we address like that example of the bikini competitor and the horror stories, and maybe kind of like explaining why peak week has this scary reputation?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I think that's a good start.
Yeah.
Because like getting myths out of the way and identifying the horror stories is definitely the biggest thing, because I feel like that's the biggest misconception. Like, your peak week does not have to be horrible. Like, you should not be absolutely miserable going into your show. So I think the number one thing that even I hear, or just in general, is excessive cardio and water depletion. So while water manipulation is a thing, I hear more times than not that people are getting water pulled from them completely.
Yeah.
Absolutely zero water the week of peak week. And that is just extremely...
The whole week of peak week?
Or maybe like the last half of it. Like 2-3 days before their show.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I've heard that too, for sure. And that's just downright dangerous. Like, you're asking to have kidney infection, kidney failure, send yourself to the hospital, like
pass out on stage.
We've seen that too. Mm-hmm. We've seen that at shows. So that's a huge problem. What would you consider excessive cardio?
I mean, it's common for people to do, like an hour and a half of cardio through prep, but I would say leading up to peak week, your cardio should be no more than maybe 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, I would disagree maybe a little bit there. I think it definitely depends on what you're doing in your prep. So if you're at a point in your prep where you're doing 90 minutes, you're probably going to enter peak week doing 90 minutes, and then hopefully you can kind of taper towards the end of the week just to drop some inflammation and work, get water and all that out. But yeah, it'll vary. I think the more extreme examples I've heard of is like sometimes girls are doing like 3 hours of cardio. 2 hours happens. I would never want to give an athlete 2 hours of cardio. That happens. Mm-hmm. But the example of like that much cardio, 2+ hours, 2-3 hours, whatever, plus almost no calories, plus like minimal water. Like, that's just really a recipe for disaster. I don't know how anyone thinks that that's a formula for success, even if someone's not lean enough, because that's really where this comes from, right? It's like, let's say you're new, your coach may or may not have the experience in bodybuilding, and they're trying to get you leaner, but you're actually probably better just showing up a little less lean. Yeah. And rested with some water in you than to put your body through all that. Because what would probably end up happening in that case is not only are you going to show up on stage looking not lean enough, you're also probably going to look super flat. Mm-hmm. So you're going to look flat and not lean. Whereas at least if you're eating and drinking water, you won't be flat. You just won't look lean enough. Yeah. Like, that's a better scenario.
Combination, for sure. So, and I mean, long-term health-wise.
Yeah, long-term health-wise
also a better option.
So, I mean, I've been there where I've had, my first show was a bit extreme, where I was definitely eating like less than 1,000 calories a day. I was told not to drink any water on show day. I can't remember what I did the day before with water. I think it was probably pretty minimal. Mm-hmm. I was told I could chew gum. Also a bad idea. That's, just going to bloat your stomach. Yeah. So, there's a lot of these extreme protocols out there. So I think hopefully that dispels a little bit of the myth. And I think that's where kind of some of the fear and, things come from. And at the same time, too, why don't we talk about depleting during a peak week? Because that is a method of getting someone to their best. Mm-hmm. And that may also be where some of the just frustration or anguish or discomfort or whatever comes from. Why don't we talk a little bit about like depleting into a show?
Yeah, so I feel like for that it could be like carb manipulation or utilizing a diuretic, things like that, like cutting back on those. I mean, and also utilizing cardio without doing anything excessive. Like, that's where you have a tool bag and utilizing multiple tools instead of just going extreme on one or the other. That's where you kind of find that balance of utilizing multiple things that have, a healthy balance throughout, instead of just, 3 hours of cardio, eat no food, and then, hey, let's throw a diuretic in there. So now you're completely dehydrated, you have absolutely no water. Now you're expending even more energy by doing 3 hours of cardio, depleting yourself even more. And then, like you said, that just has a negative effect in general. So I feel like that's where, the manipulation throughout the week of, water manipulation or carb manipulation, things like that, and then doing that at a healthy level while utilizing a diuretic, that balance can be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and depleting someone into a show can really just mean that, there's no carb up, right? Like a lot of people, depending on what you're reading online, you think, oh, there's one way to peak week. You deplete and then you carb up. Well, not necessarily. Some athletes literally look better when they're more carb depleted, or they're more flat, or maybe they are just kind of on that borderline of being like not quite lean enough, and maybe pulling down their carbs actually gives them a better look, or pulling down their food gives them a better look throughout the week. So that's where the coach has to have an eye for what variable manipulation is going to bring the athlete in at their best.
Yeah.
So again, it's not one size fits all.
Yeah, so. And that's where social media, and I mean, even, and this isn't me saying don't make friends backstage, because that is literally my number one tip for everything. It's hearing someone else's story and their process to get to where they're at is just to see it from a different perspective, not to question your journey. Your coach did what they did because they felt that that's what was right for you. Obviously, unless you have a coach that's doing the 3 hours of cardio, minimal carbs, no water, that kind of thing, if it's something extreme, then yes, that is to be questioned. But if you're going through it and they're, maybe tapering water down a little bit, or tapering carbs down, not doing a carb up, something like that, you're not the girl that eats 600 grams of carbs the day before your show. That's fine. Your coach is doing what they saw fit for you, your physique, and the way your body responds to certain things. So it's utilizing other people's journeys as just a different perspective of like, oh, that's an interesting way to do it. And realizing that everybody's body's different and responds to different things. Yeah. So it's utilizing it as just opening your mind as opposed to comparing your journey with someone else's.
Well, and the other thing I would argue there too is if you're comparing what your protocol was, your peak week, your prep, whatever, people are not always going to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. So, your fellow competitor, she may have popped a diazide or, like a diuretic, right? Or she might be taking things that she's not telling you. Yeah. A lot of times, ladies, like people are not going to be fully transparent with what they're doing, because they don't want to be judged, or they don't, they don't want to feel shamed, or they don't want to feel like their accomplishments maybe are minimized by the fact that they, they did some protocol that they're not sharing with you. So just like take it with a grain of salt when people, are like, oh yeah, no, I didn't take a diuretic. I just, I ate 2 giant burgers last night and my coach gave me a gallon of water. And, there's certain telltale signs that once you're a little bit more understanding of how protocols work and things, you can tell like, okay, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5. Mm-hmm. So you kind of start to figure that out. So take it with a grain of salt whenever people are sharing their protocols or their prep or what they're doing with you too. Just take it for what it is. Yeah. So yeah, and I agree. I think you should always make friends backstage. Like that's one of the best parts of competing is the relationships and the friendships. Yeah. What are some of the ways for you, Sammy, like when you've done your seasons competing, how do you normally do your peaks? Like what is Kyler usually doing with you to peak into a show? Yeah, so I would say my first season, we just kind of went through, like we had no carb ups because we weren't sure. Also, I will say my first show, I wasn't lean enough. So a carb up wasn't necessarily needed because I wasn't super depleted. But I will say going into like my nationals run, that's when we started doing the like more carb ups during peak week. So what we would do is, again, I had digestion issues also. Okay. And I've had them my whole life. So we kind of already knew that going into it. And that was before I had my started my gut health protocol. So I was more prone to bloating than normal. So we would do my carb ups in the beginning of the week. And I would literally send check-in photos an hour after every meal. And we were kind of just seeing how my body would respond to certain things. Like this meal had X amount of grams of rice and this meal was rice cakes. So, okay, was I digesting
the jasmine rice better than the rice cakes? Okay, if the rice cakes were digested better, then that's what we used closer to the show. Things like that. So kind of playing around with it in the beginning of the week so we had more time to correct it or fix it, or the same thing. More correct it or, you know, make different changes throughout the week. And then I would say deeper into like junior nats and universe, we were doing carb ups. That's kind of what we utilized because at that point I was depleted, so we needed to fill my muscles out so I wasn't flat going on stage. So it was like, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was 1.5 gallons of water. Thursday, Friday was 1 gallon. And then on Friday I would finish my gallon by like 6 and then just sips of water after that. And then that's kind of what we utilized. And what was cool about it too is I was traveling, so we had flight factor and, you know, water retention. So we found, you know, different methods because that's another thing. I mean, that's not really about peak week. That's more about traveling, but just water manipulation with flights as well, like how to, you know, eliminate bloating and water retention from that. So that was a factor that, you know, kind of came into play. But
do you find that you retain water on flights?
I wasn't, but we tried a different option. Like we tried a different method. Instead of not drinking water on the flight, it was 16 ounces of water for every hour you were in the air. And I felt doing that, I had no issues of bloat or water retention. Whereas everyone else was like, just don't drink water while you're in the air. So that was one thing. And then peak week, I always prioritize sleep. I always prioritize sleep anyway, but like 9-10 hours of sleep on peak week. People underestimate the amount of hold and like weight that sleep has on your body. And I remember going to bed and I was like, I'm so bloated. I fucked up my peak. Like this isn't gonna, like I'm not gonna look good on stage. And then I would have 9 hours of sleep and I'd wake up and I'm like, oh my goodness, like what happened overnight? Like this is crazy. And I mean, obviously that was just like myself. Like Tyler was like, hey, everything looks great, you know, send check-in photos in the morning. And I'm like, all right, did you just see the photo I just saw? Because like, I don't think. And then I would get 9 hours of sleep and I'd wake up and I'd be like a brand new person. So it was definitely cool to have that opportunity to kind of, you know, start one way with no carb up. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, like everyone talks about eating more on peak week, so when's that gonna happen for me? And then, you know, the time came where like I actually put in and I was, you know, where I needed to be, so the carb up was necessary. And then we usually taper off cardio. Thursday's usually my last like training and cardio day. So then Friday is just a complete rest day. So.
Nice.
What are your protocols that you play with?
Yeah, it's varied in general. The shows last year, so that was my first prep with Jamie, and I think what she likes to do in general, although she really, I think, does try to look at the athletes in front of her and see what's best for them. She does more of a depletion and then a carb up for all of her athletes. So that was my approach. It was honestly kind of rough. I'd never done that before, and I was dieting very hard last year. So it was kind of a lot, like especially my first 2 shows, I was eating maybe 1,300 calories, 75 minutes of cardio. That I haven't eaten that little since my first year competing. So it was honestly hard to do. The first half of the week, I'd be depleted at like 1,300 calories, still doing 75 minutes of cardio. And then I think I got a little carb up like the day before, the day of, or it was decent sized. And then all of a sudden it was just like so much food. Like I was so not used to doing that. Just like lots of rice, lots of carbs, like literally Tahoe. I think I had to order more food like through Instacart because I was literally running out of like cream of rice and extra rice and stuff. Yeah, because it was like hundreds of grams of carbs. So that was different. That was definitely different to adjust to a little bit, but the process was kind of the same for all 4 shows.
Yeah.
When I worked with Kim Odo, he's a little bit more just kind of like even keel with what he seems to have athletes do, where it's like, okay, if you're looking good and you're on point, you're just going to keep eating your normal meals. And if we need to adjust up or down, and like by that point too, like my last year with him, 2022, I did have more muscle mass. In general, when you're tall, you've got to be careful about looking too like lanky, too lean, not filled out enough. So he would usually use things more like fats, like steak, salmon, as well as a little bit of carbs like rice and things like that to just fill you out. But he tended to do, I think, a little bit more fats, more clean meals and stuff. If you were in a really bad spot, maybe you could go get a burger, or if you were going show to show and you were like about lean enough and stuff, like you could go have burger, fries, whatever in between a show. So that's more of what it was. With Jamie, I have not cut water. I did not cut water any of the shows, which was nice. That was nice. It was different. It was different to need to pee so much on show day. Not mess up your tan.
Yeah.
Kim does cut water. At least he cut my water a little bit more. So that's more of what I've been used to with him. So it's been interesting to go through the different approaches and figure out what works best. I think I did like kind of the depletion followed by a carb up. However, I think that I was just so dieted down that I really don't feel like last year was my best look. And I hope that whenever I do get on stage next, I'll kind of figure out, okay, where's that sweet spot of bringing my body in where it needs to be during the prep and then peaking it properly into the shows. So we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and I feel like that is one thing. It's like over time you'll understand yourself what's best for your body too. So it's like, yes, while you pay a coach, you trust your coach and you trust what your coach says, it should also be a learning process for you. Understanding, ask questions, okay, hey coach, why are we doing this instead of this? It's not that I don't trust you, I just want to learn for myself. Again, this is a long-term thing. You should want to know why you're doing what you're doing. Again, the actual science behind it, the methods, the process, the protocol is going to be given to you from a coach, but don't just go into it blind. Don't just say, okay, and do it. Ask them why they're doing that. And I feel like that, once I started doing that, it really opened my eyes as to like, okay, if I do this, then this is going to happen. But if I do this and this doesn't happen, then what's plan B? And it really just allows you to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, as opposed to just going into it blind and just only following directions because they're given to you. And I feel like that's a nice thing to have as a competitor, is a better understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it, so that you just know, like, you're educated and you're not just, walking into it completely uneducated and just kind of following with a blind trail. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, so some basic concepts that carbs hold water. So if you're carbing up a lot, you may need to, it might make sense to do more of a push-pull method, meaning you're pushing carbs, you're pulling water, because carbs are going to introduce more water into your body. They're going to make you hold a little more water. So pulling the water out while adding the carbs in, when you're in that depleted state, is going to give that fuller pop to the muscle tissue. And again, everyone's different. So just like things like that, what does sodium do? Sodium helps pull the carbs into the muscle. But there are more old school approaches where you're pulling sodium completely. So it depends, person to person, the approach you're taking, how much muscle mass you have, which division you're in. So yeah, those are great points, Sammy. Like, you should understand why your coach is doing what you're doing or what they're doing. And you should be able to ask them, like, hey, why are we doing this? Like, I'll tell my athletes, depending on how they're looking, like, hey, this week I'm anticipating that I'm going to probably deplete you into the show, or I think I'll probably deplete you, and then hopefully second half of the week we start carbing up. It will just depend. Like, it will just, if you're not sleeping and your body's holding inflammation and holding water, that affects the look. And you're absolutely right, Sammy. Like, getting sleep, bringing your cortisol down, all of that makes such a difference in the look that you put on stage. And all these little details, like, it really does matter. So it's important that you're thinking about all these things and you're not just checking off the boxes of like, okay, I did my cardio, I did my workout. It's the right meal timing, eating the right things, recovering the right way, practicing your posing, like all those things, so that you're on point. Following the instructions your coach gives you. If your coach is asking for frequent check-in photos and you're not providing those, or you're saying, oh, I'm busy, I can't, I'll do it tomorrow. Your coach is kind of flying blind and they might be missing out on, valuable data to make adjustments for you. So,
and it could be an adjustment that's like a make or break, because peak week is very important. Like, you have a few days left. You are trying to peak your body to the best of its ability. So yeah, missing a check-in or missing a photo and giving it to them the next day. Like I said, for me, I was doing them an hour after every meal. So I needed to make sure that within my schedule, I had the ability to step away from wherever I was an hour after my meal to take that photo and send it in, so that I knew what protocol to do next, so that my coach could give me that next protocol. So these are also just things to think of too, like when you're approaching peak week, or, you know, a couple weeks out, you can ask your coach, like, hey, what should I expect during peak week? I want to make sure that my schedule is free in the spots and places and, you know, where I can be free, but I want to make sure that it aligns with what you're going to need from me. If you're working a 9 to 5 and you don't have time to take off of work, you might be working peak week. That is so common. That is so normal. But you want to make sure, like, if you can get some information ahead of time from your coach to have that idea of what to expect. They might not have a cookie cutter program, and hopefully they don't have a cookie cutter program to give you a week in advance of, like, hey, this is your peak week protocol. Because sometimes it is going to take a day-to-day basis to figure out what is needed and how to do it and how to peak you properly. So if you have that ability to ask them for some information ahead of time, like, hey, what should I expect? And they can say, hey, we might do this, or we might do this, or we might do this. But to have all three options, so you know kind of what to expect, so you're not going into peak week blind, and you have, you know, when you have the ability to pre-plan to a degree, your cortisol levels are going to be lower as well, because you're not going to be stressed. You're not going to be sitting there anxious wondering, okay, well, what's going to happen? Or you've created this picture of what peak week's going to look like in your head, and you're like, ooh, everybody's carbs go up and their cardio goes down. Cool, that's what I should expect. And then Monday they're like an hour and a half cardio, and you're going to keep the 100 carbs that you're at, you know, for example. And you're like, okay.
You're just heartbroken.
Now you're stressed, you're heartbroken, you're upset, you're hungry. You've had this ideology of like this perfect peak week that you were gonna have, and now it's the opposite. So that's gonna stress you out. That's gonna, obviously, you're gonna feel some type of way, and that's all gonna affect you that week. You wanna go into your show, you know, with a positive mindset, with, you know, as minimal stress as possible. So being able to get as much information as you can ahead of time to pre-plan and really just make sure you're available and, you know, you have an idea of what's going to happen is super important too.
Yeah, and your point about peak week being like the most important week, it really is. Like, I've had this happen on show day where I'm there on site with my girls, and they're running around to hair and makeup, and I'll check in with them in the morning right before prejudging, and I'll say, okay, how many meals have you had so far? And they'll say, oh, 1. And I'm like, wait, you didn't eat your second meal? Oh no, I was busy at hair and makeup. It's like, those are the most important meals. Like, the peak week, it is the most important week, because that determines what you actually put on stage. So I cannot emphasize that enough. Peak week is the most important week. In that, it determines how you get on stage. Like, what is the look that you put on stage? Yes, your prep and how the overall prep goes gets you 90% of the way there, but the peak week determines like what your body does. And if you're missing meals, or you're skipping your cardio, or you're doing more cardio when your coach has told you not to, like, that is gonna go sideways on you. So I cannot emphasize that enough. Like, peak week, those are the most important days, and the days where you've got to prioritize like your sleep, your recovery, eating your meals at the right time, following your coach's direction, so that you can get on stage at your best. Otherwise, like, what was the point? Yeah. What was the point of following your prep for 16, 18 weeks just to goof around during the most important few days of the prep?
And like you just said too, doing extra cardio. While some people think it's like, oh, what's an extra 15 minutes? What's an extra 30 minutes? Like,
what's an extra spin class this week?
You don't realize, like, again, it is a tailored, hopefully this is your case, it is a very tailored program to you, your body, the way your body's responded to everything over the last 12, 14, 16, whatever many weeks that your coach has deemed necessary for you. And just because you look in the mirror and you're like, I don't feel like I'm ready, doesn't mean that that's what your coach sees. So if your coach says, hey, Laura, do 30 minutes of cardio today, that's what I want you to do. And you're like, well, I don't feel like I'm ready, I need to do an hour. That will put more stress on you. It'll do more of a detriment than a benefit to you, even though that's what you see in the mirror and what you think you need. Utilizing that 30 minutes to sit on the couch and put your feet up to reduce swelling and inflammation is probably a better result for you than doing that extra 30 minutes of cardio that you thought you needed because you thought you looked a little bloated. But what you really needed was just an extra hour of sleep to rest and recover and really allow your body to digest the food and, again, recover.
Yeah.
So really just taking the protocol to heart and not, coming up with all these misconceptions or, miscalculations yourself based on what you see is super important. And I think another big thing is backstage protocols, is that everybody has a different way, especially backstage, day of show, that they peak properly or get ready to go on stage. And this might be a show day, what to expect, but I think to briefly touch on it is when you are backstage, you will see the most oddball, out of pocket ways that people peak before they get on stage. Just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean you need to do it. Just because someone downs 10 packets of salt before they get on stage doesn't mean you need to do it. Just because someone eats 12 Snickers bars before they get back on stage doesn't mean you need to do it. There are multiple ways, multiple options. Every coach has their preferred method, but I feel like that was a big thing for me, especially once I got to the national level. Like, some of the stuff I saw people doing backstage, I'm like, damn, why can't I do that? I'm like, she's eating a Pop-Tart. I'm like, she's eating icing out of the jar. I'm like, she just ate, like, I was seeing.
The thing too, the thing with that, I want to hear more examples, but the thing with that too is sometimes these girls are just eating. They're not even following their coach's directions. Like, the icing out of the jar, I can't even, wrap my head around that because that's just, fat and good.
I love doing that on and off. Like, I used to be found in the refrigerator, hands deep in icing, obviously when I was little. But, I would vomit backstage.
Yeah, but my point is, and I didn't realize this, I think, until I was a pro, because I would see girls and, I remember examples where, I was at a show with Kim and several of us other athletes, and, one of the girls is just downing rice cakes and jelly and peanut butter, it's nobody's, it's there's no tomorrow. And I'm like, damn, look at her, she's getting all those rice cakes and stuff. She's not supposed to be eating them. Kim finds her and he's like, what are you doing? Are you done? And he's making a joke about it, smacking her hand away from the snacks and the snack table and stuff they had from us. But some of these girls too, they're not following protocol, doing these weird things. So again, you're absolutely right. Do not think that you need to do what someone else is doing, because I guarantee you some of those people have just gone AWOL and their brains have just checked out the moment they got a bite of sugar and they're just eating at this point.
Yeah. And another thing too is if you have a coach, and these are just things that I've experienced or I've seen or I've heard, if for some reason your coach is not at your show, do not allow someone else backstage to influence what you should be doing. So for example, say, you're backstage as a competitor, another coach comes up to you and says, you should do this before you get on stage. You should have a rice cake with peanut butter. You should have 3 packets of salt. You should whatever. And your coach has told you otherwise, but say maybe your coach is out of town, or they're not in the same city, they're at another show, or whatever the case may be, but based on the photos and the check-in information and all of that, your coach has given you your protocol for backstage. Just because someone sees you in person and thinks that you should do something else does not mean you should do it. So again, just trusting your coach and trusting that they know your body the best and they know what protocols you should be taking, and the influence of others shouldn't be dictating what you do backstage. I think that's super important too, because again, the influence of others can be a make or break deciding factor of how you do on stage, and that close to getting on stage too. You could be 15 minutes away, 10 minutes away from being on stage, and a bite of something or a packet of this can make or break the way you look when you step on that stage. So it's super important to trust the process. Trust your coach's protocols.
Yeah. And ask questions too if you're curious, wait, why do I have to eat salt before I go on stage? Or why am I not having any water? Whatever it is, ask some questions. So yeah, that's a great point. The other thing I feel like is a big part of peak week that maybe we should talk about too is, especially for us females, all the appointments and like beauty things that go into the peak week, because I also feel like that can add stress too.
Yes.
When we're getting ready for shows. So for you, Sammy, like what is your beauty routine usually look like during peak week? Is there anything you do to make that a little bit more manageable, because we can have a lot of appointments leading up to a show?
So for me, if say it's a local show and I don't have to travel, I book I never book everything in the same day. I spread it out. So like if I get my nails done on Monday, I know that obviously nails will last all week. If I'm getting my hair done, I'll get my hair done on Wednesday, because I have, about 2 days before I step on stage. So it'll be, relatively fresh, things like that. So just like planning it out, like knowing like, okay, how far in advance can I get something done? Like I don't get my lashes done, but like say you're someone who does. Okay, can you get your lashes done like maybe the week before peak week, so that you're not, rushing the week of peak week to get them done, but that they'll last and they'll still be fresh. So it's like really just managing your time and kind of understanding like not everything has to be done in the same day, because if you're getting your hair done, your lashes done, and your nails done all in the same day, you're going to be away from home all day. If your coach needs check-in photos, you're not going to be able to take them most likely. If you have meals to eat every 2 hours and you're sitting in, you're laying down on the lash bed with your eyes closed, you clearly cannot eat a meal.
Yeah.
So it's like just realizing those, like obviously, being at a hairdresser, that's a little bit easier to eat a meal, or getting your nails done, you kind of really can't eat a meal, but it's just really just like utilizing that time and like kind of spacing it out. I found that like spacing it out throughout the week and allowing myself like each day to have something, it also kind of like reduces stress each day. Like I'm pampering myself each day leading up to the show, as opposed to like doing everything in one day and then it's over. It's like almost like a progression leading up to the show. So it's kind of nice to like spread it out too, because you just feel more pampered throughout the week as opposed to just like doing it all in one time.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have like a process that you usually do?
Yeah, I think a few things. So definitely the nails, I'll kind of just slot that in wherever I have time. And obviously if you're doing like acrylic nails, they usually last really good. Worst case scenario, if something breaks or whatever, you can usually go find a salon at wherever your show's at. That hair, since I do like 1 row of extensions, I usually don't have a hair appointment unless they need to be like moved up. So I will try to time that like closer to the show season, right? And just make sure that the hair is good to go. Although this year or whenever I compete next, I think I'm going to start doing blowouts before my show, just because my hair is naturally very frizzy. It kind of bit me in the butt at Clash last year in Charleston, South Carolina. My hair was it was a train wreck, and I think it probably affected my placing, and it definitely just affected my overall look because it was so frizzy. And I had V's team do it, but it just like was almost not salvageable. So I think that was a lesson learned. Like either I need to blow out my own hair or I need to get a blowout before shows. I don't do waxing. I know some ladies do waxing, so you've got to kind of factor that in. And then what else? I guess that's really it. What hair, nails. Since I shave, that's just usually like a day or two prior to the first coat of tan. But
what are your thoughts on like massages?
Yeah, massages are great. I do like, and especially when you're in prep and your body's so beat up, I do like body work. And you can get body work closer to the show if the person you're doing it with is familiar with athletes. Like someone like Dale here in Costa Mesa, he works with a lot of athletes. He knows what to do during peak week to just kind of like make sure you're mobile, make sure you're good without marking you up or doing anything that's going to cause a lot of water retention. If you're doing an old school like deep tissue massage where they're like really getting in there, working things out where you could hold water, I would say give yourself a cutoff of like a week before the show. Don't do anything like that. Something like cupping, I would say don't do 2 weeks or more before the show, because those cupping marks can last a long time. So those are kind of the main things. Really with the massages, it's about, and cupping and whatnot, it's about leaving marks, because things like that, that makes me think of something else. We'll leave marks, and then you don't want to be retaining fluids, right? If we're trying to drop all our fluids and our inflammation to really show our nice lines and all that, you don't want to be doing that too close to the show. Okay, tan lines.
Yes.
Tan lines
prepping skin.
Should not be there. That is something I have seen. Actually, my friend Yulia too, who competed the other week, she mentioned something about. I think I can't remember.
She's this weekend.
She didn't do Wasatch. I know she did Clash.
She's competing this week.
Yeah, I know.
Like tomorrow, yeah.
I know. She made a comment, I think maybe it was her Clash show about tan lines or something like that. I feel like she did one more show after Clash, but I might be getting confused. So tan lines should not show. I had a posing client one time where she had been walking on the beach to get her steps, and she had these really intense short lines, and I warned her, I'm like, girl, you gotta go hit a tanning bed, like try to even this out. And she's like, oh no, the tan will cover it. And I'm like, the tan did not cover it. And the judges commented on it. It was very obvious. Like, it's these lines like right across your legs. The spray tan only does so much. If you're brown and then you're white, that's a very big difference. So yeah, you're right. Skin prep. I'm also the worst at this. I was sharing with a posing client today. I'm the worst with shaving. Like, I nick myself.
Oh, yeah.
Usually at least once per season. So, like, last year I got myself really good for Tahoe, and I was just lucky that I had a friend who helped me with the Pro-Tan DIY a lot, because I, like, used a brand new razor, cut myself, like, on my shoulder, a little bit on my stomach, like, too much pressure with a brand new razor.
And you're, like, doing your whole body.
And I literally have so much surface area. It takes me, like, 2 hours to do that shave, and you just get impatient. That in 2022 at Sasquatch, I nicked this shoulder really bad with the brand new razor, because I was just like trying to get back there and too much pressure. So you got to be really mindful about your skin. Like, all these little details, at the pro level, they absolutely make a difference. Like, every little thing they see, they look at, like your hair, your makeup, like all those things matter. And if you're an amateur competitor and you want to level up, and you want to turn pro or whatever that is, or win a show, you have to think about all of these things with the same mindset that us pros do. And, you know, now being a pro, I'm realizing that my like level of attention to detail and like meticulousness with all of these things has to increase. Like, that lesson learned with the blowout last year, and I never really ran into that issue, but I'm like, oh shoot, no, this is a problem. Like, my hair needs to be in a specific state when I go see a hair and makeup artist, because they're not wizards. They don't have time or the abilities to blow out my hair and then style it before a show. Like, it has to already be good to go. Yeah. So that it looks smooth and beautiful on stage and not like slightly frizzy and, you know, and with the curls falling out. Yeah. So.
And that's, I will say, like, that just goes back to stage presence too. It's like, if you are getting extensions, like, make sure you've put them in before the show. Make sure they're blended. Make sure when you're curling your hair, your extensions are blended. Like, that, like, hair is one thing where you can cut a cost. You don't necessarily have to spend $150, $200 to have someone do it, but make sure you know what you're doing or you've practiced it before. You are literally getting on stage, turning your back to the judges, and they see your hair. So if you have extensions and they are not blended, it's going to show. You're going to see it. Yeah. And that's
or you straighten your hair and there's like a kink of where you missed it, like they see all that. Yeah. They see all that.
So it's like, just utilize, like, you know, if you've made a friend at Athletes Check-In and you're there by yourself, like, utilize making friends. Like, they're all there for the same thing, you know? Call someone, have them look at the back of your head, like, you know, whatever it is. So it's just like really taking that time and like going back to the prepping the skin, like exfoliating every day leading up to the show and moisturizing every day leading up to the show. I have found my holy grail of skincare combination. It's the Get Buffed by Pro-Tan, and it's Neutrogena Hydro Boost. 2 simple, very affordable products. I use both of those, and then I use Lipoxyderm just, you know, as an extra thing. Like,
I use Lipoxyderm too.
Yeah, so
code Laura.
I was just gonna say, use Laura's code. But like, those are the 3 things I religiously use on peak week every single day. I'm Italian. I have thick, dark hair. What I do personally, and this is like my little shaving hack, I don't shave for, this might sound gross, but like, it's what works for me, so I don't really care. But like, I don't shave for like at least 4 or 5 days before the show, so that when I do shave, it's a super close shave.
Agreed.
So I shave like either Thursday night or Friday morning. with a brand new razor, 5-blade razor. That's all I'll use. Any less, I will cut myself or I won't get a super close shave. So it's like I literally shave my legs, my arms, everything, bikini.
And you have to.
Everything.
You have to.
Yeah, and that is what's going to give me the best tan. Like I exfoliate, moisturize every day so that my skin absorbs the tan. I go tanning leading up to the show. I go at least twice a week leading up to the show. Sometimes 3, but that's just like me personally because I just know like what base tan, how my skin tans, so that I have a base tan so that when the tan does wash off, I'm like, you can see I haven't been tanning. I'm super pale. So when you get an extra dark tan and then it starts to come off, like I literally look like there's something wrong. So I get a base tan for my, for my skin, for it to absorb the tan and look a little bit more natural, but also for when the tan washes off. So those are just things to keep in mind. Like if you're throwing peak week out the door in terms of like self-care, that's going to have just as much of an effect as, throwing your protocol out the window, because they're looking at your overall package on stage. Yeah. How your tan is, how your hair is, things like that. So while diet, like nutrition and training are super important, self-care the week of peak week is also something to really prioritize and think about too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like bikini, they always say it's a look. And the look includes like your hair, your makeup, your skin, like not just your face, your body, everything. So yeah, those are all great tips, and we could definitely cover that maybe like on its own episode, like tanning or Chardonnay or something like that. But as far as peak week, I feel like we've talked about a lot. Do you have any like funny peak week stories or moments or anything crazy you've done on peak week?
And this is only funny because now I look back and I'm like, why did I do that? I was literally at athletes check-in eating tortillas out of the bag. Like processed Mission tortillas, and it was so that I could get my carbs in, because I was like, oh, I can eat carbs, like this is great. And this was my
like wheat tortillas or like flour?
No, yeah, like white flour. Literally flour. Okay. Like not even like the spinach, like not even like trying to be somewhat. I got a little bit of a carb up.
But just like full on gluten.
Just full on processed gluten. And then I was like, I feel kind of bloated. And my coach was like, you did not tell me that that's what you were eating. And I was like, I'm sorry. He's like, that's why you're feeling bloated. He's like, rice cakes or, something. And it was literally my first prep. So I was like, and I was literally at athletes check-in just trying to get my last bit of carbs in. And I was like, why do I feel bloated? My coach was like, what did you eat? And I was like, tortillas. And he's like, what? Why would you do that? And I was like, because it sounded good and I had carbs. And he's like, no, please don't do that. So that was like a funny first show kind of thing. But I can't think of anything else. Anything for you?
Yeah. I'm sure I have a lot if I sat down and thought about it. I know one time in one of my peak weeks, I left my phone. I was like with my trainer. I left my phone on top of my car with the screen unlocked. Like, so I go do my whole workout, can't find my phone. It's the end of the workout, can't find my phone. I'm freaking out. It's on top of my car with the screen unlocked outside the gym. Like, thank you, Lord, for like thinking of me. But yeah, some of the boneheaded things I've done on peak week. I'm sure I have more. I just can't think of them at the moment. Yeah. But yeah.
It's when you travel on peak week too. It's like, thankfully when I travel with Chris, and I'm like, just take the wheel. I'm like, I'm following. I'm like, I'm checked out.
Yeah.
I'm like,
as it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need a Chris. So.
We'll find you.
I'll find one for sure. So other than that, I feel like we covered it really well. Is there anything else we should mention as far as peak week, Sammy?
No, I feel like that's the biggest things, myths, misconceptions, different processes. Again, reiterating that it's not a one size fits all. Don't let social media, make you think that it's supposed to be one way when it's, your bodybuilding journey isn't everybody else's. So your peak week journey is not going to be everybody else's either. But I feel like if there is anything that we missed or a topic you guys want us to talk on a little bit more, let us know in the comments or, DM one of us, and we would love to, gear an episode around that solely or go into it a little bit more in detail. But I think we covered.
Yeah, I think we did too. Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Sammy. Social media, it's a way for people to, kind of share their highlight reel, get attention. So a lot of times that may not be the best source of information. So just continue learning, continue, on in your journey, do your best. And, we're so glad you guys could join us today. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on an audio platform, rate us 5 stars. And as always, share with a friend, and we'll catch you guys next time.